Diagnosis of brain death is a fabrication. People don't even realize it anymore, but it has been like this from the very beginning, and it continues to this day. This concept was invented primarily for the purpose of organ removal, and secondly, to avoid wasting resources on treating those who would not be able to return to active life. Those who will just exist but won't recover. In reality, brain death is a way to obtain organs. They cannot be taken from a person whose body has already stopped functioning. All transplanted organs are healthy, which means they are only taken from those whose hearts are still beating. This is not something people usually talk about, because if they find out the truth, they will be outraged. And that makes sense. Whose organs are most often removed? Of course, from children, but especially from people aged 16 to 30. If their lives are in danger, if they are unconscious and on a ventilator, their organs are considered potential for transplantation. Everyone who is diagnosed with brain death still has a heartbeat, circulation, and breathing. If that weren't the case, there would be no need to introduce this term at all. Everything would be obvious.
Let's take a look, shall we? Is this really true, first of all, or is it just a rumor?
If I focus specifically on this person, I've actually tuned in a bit to him right now. It's clear that he's talking purely about this. He's speaking from a medical standpoint and also from a certain political perspective. Yes, that is indeed the case. First of all, transplantology is one of the most profitable fields in modern medicine. That's a fact. It does sound cynical. But by introducing this term of brain death, we can really just say that, yes, the person has died. Although it is formal, it still has a beating heart and blood there. Circulating. You know, this is more of a question from the realm of those medical political manipulations aimed at making more money or saving more money because, for example, if this person is on some kind of government budget supported by the state and, especially in the West, in Western clinics in America, a day in that very clinic on a ventilator costs a fortune. And all of this comes from the state budget. So yes, he's absolutely telling the truth.
Well, I'm curious from the perspective of the spirit that lives in this body. What is it like for him? Did he really choose this path for himself? So it seems like his body is still alive, and potentially he could live for several more years in this state. People can be in a coma for a long time too. And he chooses to have this done to him, to be, so to speak, put to death. Is this the spirit's choice? Or is it somehow inappropriate to act like this way?
Look, again, we've talked about this many times on this channel. Everything is decided from the top down. And without the spirit's desire to leave this world, there will never be a departure. No matter how many times we've explored the topic of the afterlife, at least sometime before leaving, the spirit makes the decision to depart from here in various ways. It can happen conditionally, through a coma, through illness. It could be anything. I don't know. You step outside and a brick falls. It can be anything. But without the spirit's desire, no one ever leaves. There are two types of departure from what we've seen. Two styles of departure. There is a clear departure. If a person is on a certain mission, their departure is, well, they are firmly standing in one place. He's 87 years old. Well, give or take. So it can kind of float a bit within that specific range, like for 3 years. Yes, for 5 years, but not more. And the second type of departure is when there is a certain delta, usually about 15 years. This is in the case where a person has the opportunity to live a little longer and is a bit less dependent on a bunch of different factors like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yes, they can really choose, but also about 6 months or a month in advance, it's no coincidence that all sensitive people know when they are going to die because it's really visible. And if a person is already in a coma and it ends with them passing away, it means that either their time has come according to that specific number, or it's time, as they say, within a certain range. But he chose. Without the spirit's will, nothing like that ever happens.
Well, okay, so look, if the spirit chose to leave, why can't it just leave on its own? So it leaves, and for example, the heart stops, right? Or what other processes happen?
You always have to die from something. There must be a certain reason. Every consequence has its own cause. Well, I mean, for your heart to stop, you must have a bad heart. Well, I mean, at the very least.
No, but what if perhaps the spirit leaves the body? No?
Not quite.
So tell me, how does it work?
It works extremely simply. In order to, as they say, leave this place, you need to choose how you will leave. The ability to choose for yourself when you feel that your time is coming, to just take and die by your own will, as they say. The spirit just leaves, and that's it. This is a skill of the so-called great masters who deal with this topic.
This is about the light body, taking control of your consciousness.
Including about the light body. But if we talk about the usual passing of a person who is not so, let's say, connected to their etheric, astral, or mental levels, they can't just, simply let go and die. They need a reason. And there can be many different reasons. What is this? These are cardiovascular diseases, oncology, accidents, and the spirit chooses. I'll say more. There is a separate field of psychosomatic specialists, guys who are involved in healing diseases. I personally know guys who have healed from cancer, almost in the last stage, purely through psychosomatics, or rather, somatology as a science. Nevertheless, I know a number of stories where, for example, you've already removed the cause, that's it. That's exactly the reason that was initiated, essentially, by the spirit to simply leave this place. The cause was removed by force. The person started to recover, and the next day they were hit by a car. Or someone else. So if the spirit has already decided to leave this body, it will find a way.
So this is also, like a kind of variability. We have a very diverse, let's call it, game here. Everyone chooses their own quirks, which may seem creepy or terrible to many. And yet it also has its place. And it is still, in any case, a choice of the spirit or some kind of lesson for the spirit and so on.
Yes, exactly. In fact, if you develop sensitivity, you can also see the date of your departure, the so-called day X, your loved ones too. And your loved ones too, yes. This can be done through the higher self. We have a school on this topic. Again, yes, all the links to the discount groups are under this topic. This can be done through some extrasensory means, through the egregore, but usually it's clearer and faster through the higher self. So for those who are interested in this topic, please come.
Okay. And here's another point that I want to clarify so that everyone understands. So if we take a person who is in a coma, right, specifically from this perspective, and everything is still functioning, well, there might be some pathologies. But how does classical death actually happen? Not the body light, nothing. How does the spirit leave the body? Because it doesn't seem quite right to me to say that the spirit leaves the body. So how can we explain this process? Let's just call it, to make it clear, an out-of-body experience, okay? Yes. Where is he going? Where does he come from? And so on. So what happens to the body accordingly?
And look, if you observe the stories, including those of the guys who talk about life after death, for example, through regressive hypnosis, they all actually agree that at the moment, say, of an operation, during an accident, or even in the case of a coma, right? That is a very severe illness. The spirit leaves the body in advance. So basically, the connection between the etheric, astral, and mental levels is severed, right? And the physical body. And basically, nothing is holding the spirit anymore. And very often, especially with people who are in a coma and are really close to death, you can see that their energy just drains away in the days leading up to it. So, the spirit has left the body. The spirit has left. And then?
Okay, so where has it gone?
So the body is just living out its functions? The body is just living out its functions, yeah.
How and where did the spirit enter?
Listen, well, that's true, of course. This needs to be explained quite...
Let's sum it up briefly.
To structure it. But usually, there is a certain process of transition. Recently, I actually wrote a whole series about my life after death. I carefully analyzed how it was for me. And I also analyzed how it was for other guys. So if we go step by step. So you died. You see your body. And then you usually feel yourself being pulled upwards. You rise up all the way up, up, up. Some people feel it as a kind of tunnel that you're moving through, right? And some just feel like they're being pulled somewhere. And then something starts to manifest at the other end, so to speak, of this funnel or this whole experience that you're moving through. On the other side, someone is already there to greet you, like so-called guides or guardian angels or helpers. This is already a certain layer of the lower astral plane, close to Earth, or even the etheric plane, depending on how many burdens you've accumulated throughout this life. This process of transition and purification from these earthly dense physical layers, it happens quite differently depending on the person. If you've accumulated a lot of possible blocks and beliefs in that very mind, I mean, if you didn't believe in an afterlife, if you drank, smoked, did drugs, and basically just lay under a fence, and all that interested you was very dense and material energy, the process of freeing yourself, so to speak, from this accumulated substance will take a bit longer. There are different types and kinds, meaning that it's usually carried out using various technical means. Then you go higher, higher, higher. And at some point you find yourself in what is called the afterlife. A life between lives, it's also called LBL hypnosis, a specific type of hypnosis that specializes in taking you into the life between lives. LBL hypnosis.
So look, what we call this is the Bordeaux space. Do you know that concept? That's exactly where ideally this happens. The cleansing, as you call it. This is what was before, but as far as I know, Bordeaux doesn't relate to the astral at all.
The problem is that here we again run into terminology. Plus, if you take the Tibetan Book of the Dead, which describes all of this, or take, for example, Carlos Castaneda, who wrote based on these, the beliefs of the Native Americans. In South America, the whole theme of life after death is not very well developed. What Michael Newton writes about, what Cannon writes about, is much closer to what we've seen and what I've personally seen. Well, that is to say, there is a certain process of transition. That's true, but it's not that scary and not that difficult, and you won't particularly fall through there. Well, that is, if you have really, really many burdens, yes. Yes, you will, as they say, cleanse yourself in this limbo, let's call it by this term, for quite a long time. But sooner or later, your spirit will go through this cleansing. And then you keep rising higher and higher from these more etheric layers of the earth, getting closer to the astral layers of the earth. And there, in the astral layers of the earth, that's where you stay. So there it's a whole different story. Everyone has their own. Meeting with soulmates, some kind of post-mortem experiences, that life, it happens right there. In the astrals, in the astral plane of the earth, right? And then there are different variations of this life. If anyone is interested in getting to know my perspective, it's quite unconventional. I'll put it this way. I usually have an unconventional view on death. You can again find it through the link below this video, somewhere down there.
All right, and then what happens? So we ended up there, let's say we met with our souls, right? You could say that we also made agreements with someone, right? So someone says that we make agreements about something here, right? And we go through joint lessons. That's where our consciousness, so to speak, meets.
Yes, exactly like that.
And how long does it last? What happens next?
It lasts quite a long time, depending on the person. There are souls that leave very quickly.
From that astral world or where?
They leave from there back here for reincarnation. Time flows faster there, much faster. Everyone talks about this. Again, what's the reason for that? Because the vibrations are higher. The denser the vibrations, the slower and more rigid time is. It's just more viscous, including time. Yes, the higher they are, the faster time moves. Because of this, by the way, there are parallel branches of reality on planet Earth, which I mean specifically for reincarnation here. They are divided into gradations. There are denser ones and there are higher ones. The higher ones, time moves faster there. And we're just looking at the so-called upper branch of reality on planet Earth. They are closer to the 22nd century over there, while we are just in the 21st century. So it's like this. It's a bit off to the side, but here, there's a radical change in vibration. Because LBL, this space of life between lives, is very high. In earthly years, the difference between the date of death and the date of new life is usually about 50 years. That's exactly it. Give or take. It will be felt there for about 15, 20 years. 15, 20. So it's really life. It's really life. In fact, you live there. And after each life, there is life there. That's why, in fact, life there in the higher spirit, which is the higher self, is much more familiar and understandable to us.
That's 100%.
Because we spend much more time there than here. Moreover, here every personality is always new, while there it's more or less the same all the time.
And there we recognize ourselves as exactly who we have always been.
And we are, yes. And that is why, when a person touches the higher self, here, I always talk about this, that the most valuable thing in terms of the higher self is contact with oneself without dying. Anyone can die and touch the higher self. Yes, but to touch the higher self here and start living a slightly more harmonious life, that's what really matters. And everyone who touches the higher self says that it feels like they've come home. It's precisely because that's how it really is. This level vibrates at the level of that very home. Here. And if we return to those worlds, to the space of life after life, there are different stories. Some people are engaged in one thing, while others are engaged in something else. Depending on the spirit's experience, the so-called age of the spirit, and a whole bunch of different things, everyone has their own story.
It's not a planet, it's not bodies, it's like, what is it even?
The afterlife worlds are tied to the planet, and this is a very important element. The afterlife worlds of Earth are the afterlife worlds of Earth. These are not the afterlife worlds of Mars. Mars has its own afterlife world. Or the Arcturians, yes. These are different afterlife worlds. And most souls, if they remember their life after death, I'm not talking about everyone, of course, but most of them won't remember that they travel between worlds. So, we died there and then let's go to other worlds, to parallel worlds, I don't know, like Alpha Centauri. That won't happen because the afterlife worlds are tied to the planet. It's literally true. The astral and higher levels, the mental and even higher levels, there are also different levels on planet Earth. It's all tied to planet Earth. By the way, because of this, some esotericists say that after death we end up in prison. So, that we're here in prison, that we're there in prison, we can't escape from these afterlife worlds. We can't. Because of this well-known concept of the world as a prison has emerged.
Well, about samsara, yes, you're right.
It's not in the sense of just that samsara.
Well, or endless reincarnation.
Yes, and they even say that we are deliberately forced to reincarnate by these higher powers. In order to, because they draw energy from this reincarnation, it's not the Hindus specifically, it's more like these techno-esotericists who say that everything around us is a matrix, and there's a matrix everywhere, and it's artificially created to torture and torment us all here. And people really love to write about this in the comments. So, you tell them that Earth is a blooming paradise. They tell you Earth is a prison, and after death it's a prison. It's all a prison. We are not free here. We are ruled by Lucifer or someone else, depending on the commentator's imagination. Well, that's not true. If you're interested in how it really is, give it a like. We've been exploring this topic for years. Give it a like, maybe we'll do a separate video. If we get a lot of likes, like really a lot, we'll make an episode.
You really read my mind, didn't you? Indeed, the topic is very deep. So what are we doing there in these afterlife worlds? What exactly, how does it happen with the spirit? If you are interested, write. And indeed, maybe Danila and I will analyze this topic separately in a big video.
Dear friends, I invite you all to my course with a personal vision, Return to the True Self. This course has been around for over 12 years. And recently we launched it in English with my complete personal vision in 6 modules, working with blocks, working with egregores, working with the ego, contacting the higher self. Answers to simple questions, answers to more complex questions, and then there's what we call the Great Journey. It's contact with space, contact with the planet, contact with God, contact with anything at your request through the higher self. Health, finances, relationships, purpose, past life. The course is available at any time. You can sign up for it using the link below this video. Come on over, I'll be waiting for you.